afternoon to everybody. My name's Angie Chu, and my guest here today is Ching, and we're going to be addressing this topic called death. Many people don't want to talk about it, but I think it's a great thing to talk about because it's something that's definitely going to happen in our life. There's no escape. The moment we are conceived in our mother's womb, we are subject to death. For some fetuses, doesn't even get born because there may be a miscarriage or stillborn. And some children are born and they don't actually grow up because death arrives before they have a chance to grow up. And some of us will grow to a certain age. I feel very grateful to have the opportunity to be 59 years old. But I don't know if I'm going to see my 60th birthday because the reality is I have no idea when my last day on earth is going to be. There's no guarantee just because our health seems pretty good that death doesn't knock on our door. That's because we could be in an accident, our heart just goes into failure, or we have a massive stroke in our brain and we stop living. Our body just expires. I had a brother who was looking very fit. He was able to swim every morning, very active, and was even very busy with his career. And one day when I was actually in the US, and I got a message on my mobile phone that he had a massive stroke. And he was never the same again because half of his brain was damaged by the stroke. It was both a bleed as well as a clot. And the doctor had to remove half his brain. His life changed completely. He was 70 years old, but very healthy and active. I mean, today, 70 is still young. He was still working. This morning, I got a message from a friend and said her father-in-law has passed away, and it was very sudden. His heart just stopped. He was found on the floor in the toilet. And he is probably in his early 60s. So we have no idea when death will strike either us or someone in our life. And age is no guarantee that we will be living longer, as we have also heard of young people's life ending because of an illness or because of an accident. Like we read in the newspaper that someone was, drowned, someone was knocked over, somebody fell off. So it's really important for us to realize that our time here is limited. And when we accept this fact that is limited, we may actually make better decisions in terms of what we do in life, the people we want to hang out with, and the choices of the jobs that we are doing and the relationships that we would like to form and maintain. You may have relationships that are uplifting in your life, people that you really enjoy being with, people that you share something in common, and you have actually a very good conversation whenever you hang out with these people. And there are people that you feel stress you up. And do you have to spend as much time with these people? Do you have a choice? The fact is you do. Or in cases when you don't have a choice, you can choose a different response with these people. This is what I teach in mindfulness. That if we don't have a choice in that person that we have to be with, live with, we can't change that person. But we can change our response to that person, including spending less time together so that we don't have as much confrontation and conflicts with. Or we learn not to get into argument. After all, arguments take two people. And if we don't say something antagonistic back, then there is no argument. There's a lovely story that always reminds me of that we have a choice in how we respond. It's called the chicken and duck story. Some of you may have heard it before. So this lady wakes up in the morning and feels that, hey, maybe it's a good thing to go for a walk in the botanic gardens. After all, it's been a while since she went to botanic gardens. So she asked the husband, would you like to go? And he said, yeah, that's a good idea. So they took a walk through the botanic gardens. As they looked up at one of the trees, she commented, this is an angsana tree. And he said, no, it's not an angsana tree. This is a cinnamon tree. And she said, no, it's not. It's an angsana tree. And he said, no, that's not an angsana tree. It's a cinnamon tree. And she said, you don't know about trees. I said, well, you know a lot about trees? And it got into this argument about what tree it is. And suddenly she remembered. They came out to the gardens to have a walk, to enjoy nature and to enjoy each other's company. She took a deep breath and she said, yes, darling, that's a cinnamon tree. And frankly, maybe both are wrong. Or maybe she was right. Or he was right. Does it really matter what tree it is? Because after all, she invited her husband for this walk to enjoy the journey, the time together. And sometimes we get into these little arguments, spoiling the moment and even spoiling the day. And sometimes setting back our relationship because when in an argument, we may end up saying something that we might feel regretful or might have hurt the person, and the person kind of feels very bitter about, resentful about, and starts building a wall. What if he or she had said, you're so stupid, you don't know anything about nature? The person who hears that would feel very hurt. And that sets back relationships. So the reason I'm sharing this story is when we know that life is short and the moments are precious, that it's more important for us not to be so concerned about being right. And it's okay not to be right. And even if we're right and somebody doesn't agree with us, that's okay too. Because after all, the time together in harmony is more important. Now, there may be some things that are really important, and then we can just share our views or state things as we would like to, but we don't have the need to convince that person to agree. That is respect. That is acceptance. So when we live life in this way, even if someone falls dead on us, we may actually find it easier to move on because we had been kind to the person while that person is alive. Lots of people, when they've lost someone, starts to regret, start to feel guilty that they were not nicer, that they were not kinder, that they were not more generous. And there is no more time left. So because I remind myself that every day, I have no idea if I'm going to still be alive tomorrow, it helps me to be mindful of not saying anything that could be the last time this person hears a sentence from me that was unpleasant. So I like to end every interaction on a kind note, or at least not hurting or offending the person as much as possible. There may be lapses, but having that awareness, having that mindfulness helps me to be at peace in every moment. So that if that is the last moment for myself or for that person, it'll be easier to move on. And if my mind is not cluttered with anger, with resentment, with bitterness, if I find that these are the last few moments of my life, I can drop back into my breath and die peacefully, focusing on the last few breaths that are left. And if someone dies suddenly on me, I have good memories and feeling less or no regrets. So, death reminding us of the limited time we have left helps us to remember to be kind, to be thoughtful, to be generous. So, that's why facing the inevitable death in this way helps us to prioritize what's really important in life. If we think we're going to live a really long time and it's forever, that's when we can end up living recklessly. So I hope that you're not going to be fearful of talking about death, and even fearful in facing that your time is limited, that your life has an expiry date, except you just don't know when the expiry is going to take place. And that's when we stop fighting for things. So I remember when my dad was actually thinking of giving me a property that had been given to his mistress. He came to Singapore, he's Malaysian, and he said, I want to give you this apartment in Penang. And I said, why, Dad? Because now you have a new girlfriend in your life. You need to take care of her and give her the apartment. And he said, no, I want to give it to you. I said, no, it's okay. Please give it to your latest girlfriend who's taking care of you. I know, right? This sounds pretty strange. But really, I knew that getting an apartment in Penang is not going to change my life. It's not going to suddenly change the quality of my well-being either. And it's an apartment I never had. So I was very pleased with myself for not wanting to grab for things and try to accumulate as much as possible. Because a mind that is greedy, that always wants more and more and more, would not find happiness in what I already have. Getting that one more apartment is not going to change the way I lead my life. It's not going to change the kind of food I'm going to eat. How's that really going to improve it? But instead, I feel happy that I was able to say, no, it's not necessary, Dad. And I just find so much joy even talking about that. So, yes, I had a very unconventional father. He had a girlfriend and then subsequently another girlfriend, right? Because he never found happiness in my mom. And I accepted that. So when he died, actually, I didn't cry because I knew I was a good daughter to him. I didn't give him misery. I gave him joy. And because I know my father tried his best to be happy. Many people may not have agreed with the way he lived, but that's not for me to judge. It's for me to accept him as he is. Because I don't wear his shoes, I don't walk his path. And he had his challenges in life. He was looking for happiness like everyone. And his approach to life may just be different from others. But my accepting him as he is enable him to feel happiness. If I didn't accept him as he is, then he would feel that he was a father that disappointed his children. And what good would that be? So I chose to see the goodness in him. And I celebrated what he did and how he made a positive difference to my life. So whenever we have gratitude, we're able to let go of the people in our life that have to leave before us. And when we have gratitude, when we leave, we will be grateful for all the people that have added happiness and also taught us many lessons in life. So now I'd like to invite Ching Yi to join me. Hi, Ching Yi.
Hi, Angie.
So I met Ching Yi when she started coming to mindfulness courses during COVID period, where we had to even do it online. So it was only after about a year that we actually met face to face. And ever since then, it's like, we're kindred sisters. And Ching Yi has a story about her journey, why she came into taking mindfulness courses, and not one, but two or three or four. So, Ching Yi, I'd like to invite you to share how you came to taking a mindfulness course at Brahm Center and how our journey has been coming together. Yeah, over to you, Ching Yi.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Angie, thanks for the introduction. And I met Angie online when my company, I'm an educator, invited us for a lunchtime talk. And thereafter, I took up the Mindfulness Foundation program. And then subsequently, the mindfulness-based stress reduction, as well as the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. I will share a little why mindfulness became a very intentional part of my life. Perhaps, Angie, is it okay that I share with the audience some slides?
Absolutely, you've got sharing rights.
Okay. So I will weave some of my perspectives as are you able to see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, right. So this afternoon, the conversation is on facing the inevitable and facing death. I would think it is a very unorthodox way to even have a conversation. And that is why I have titled it a hard conversation or a difficult conversation. I just turned 54. So yes, and Angie's younger sister, just by a little. And the reason why I I have agreed to speak on this topic is because I have faced death, not in the real terms, but in ways which are as real as it can be until I face it myself. So my last couple of years have been rather tumultuous and I would say harrowing because I was diagnosed in 2017 with multiple myeloma, and this is a cancer, it's a blood cancer, it's a cancer of the bone marrow. And no one could tell. I'm generally very sanguine in my temperament, very joyful, I would say. I continued working, in fact, with my diagnosis. And just before my chemotherapy in 2018, I actually told myself I should go traveling. And I stepped up on traveling with my husband, with my friends, also with my family, because I realized that I do not know what 2018 would bring. So 2018 was very tough. I had chemotherapy, followed by a very massive stem cell transplant. I'll share with you some pictures in a while. And I thought that that was tough. But what didn't prepare me was the following year when my own husband was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. He was a really fit guy. He was cycling. He was cycling in cross country in Singapore weekly, and also in Indonesia and in Thailand no, in Taiwan. So his diagnosis was earth-shaking. It was a seismic kind of impact on me. And his journey with cancer was only 10 months. And he passed on in 2020 in October. So these 4 years in itself forced me to grow up overnight. And it was so tough because as someone who has been hardworking, focused in my studies, focused in building a career, and I would say very focused in raising a family. So this very driven, self-directed kind of learner and person that I am became totally just, it was a total loss of control. I had no control. And last year, I had a relapse of my blood cancer, and I just started on maintenance therapy. I'm generally well. However, I am still working from home, and to this, I want to say a very big thank you to my employer for letting me work from home, because there have been physical adjustments that I need to manage. So when it comes to the journey, this is my husband who was with me in my own treatment of my blood cancer. And this was even before he knew he was sick. So we could possibly have been ill together, but the spotlight was on me. And as you can see, he was fit, good looking, and a really wonderful human being to my children and to practically everyone that know him. So this was that part of the journey where I lost my hair. However, this was really the least painful of it. And with my son, my second son, Ian, at that time going through NS, we even talked about how mommy's hair can be shorter than his. Perspective started to shift because really it was no longer just about myself. Yes, I wanted to get well. This was the stem cell transplant. This was in NUH. It was a very quiet procedure. And chemotherapy, as much as the term sounds very frightening, is actually a silent process, and the infusion is silent. And subsequently, after the very major cyclotoxic, is marked cyclotoxic in purple over there, where the mega chemotherapy goes in and clean up my entire system to prepare the body for a stem cell transplant. So that's where my own healthy stem cells, okay, this is the autologous stem cell transplant where my own stem cells were cleaned up and under very advanced processes came, and it was transplanted back to me. So this whole journey was about 6 months. I was away from work, and it brought me a lot closer to who I am and what is very dear and important to me. However, it still did not prepare me for my husband's illness. And as the saying goes, people only die once. They have no experience to draw on. But in my case, I had his passing to draw on. And while I know each one's journey is different, we do not know when, we do not know how, we do not know how long, and like what Angie earlier on put in perspective, it becomes a very real issue for me to think about. I wouldn't say it's to reckon with, because reckoning with sounds like fighting. But how do I embrace this element of mortality, and how I can still, while suffering, in this quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, while suffering, still allow myself to be happy, because my general disposition is optimistic. I am quite sunny in my personality, and I surround myself with very positive people. This is Professor Cheng. He is my oncologist. And together with my friends who have multiple myeloma traditionally hits folks that are above 60. So here, that's me with Leonard and Lillian. Leonard is in his 70s. Lillian is in her 60s. And together with other myeloma patients, we have formed a support group. And that's Josephine right at the bottom right. And she's very young. She's only in her early 40s. So earlier this month, we have even met the youngest patient who is only 39. So my reflection on this is that it is almost quite impossible to control. And given the fact that, as I earlier mentioned, me being a very naturally driven, focused, hardworking person, I had to almost rewire my entire DNA to embrace and to take on what life delivers. And this book by Atul Gawande, he's a doctor, entitled Being Mortal. I started reading his books way before I had cancer. And I even, one of his other books, Checklist Manifesto, was something that as a very driven, structured person, I like that. However, in this book, he spoke about being mortal, and certain of his quotes have stuck on with me. And one of which is here, which is life is about choices. And they are relentless because no sooner have you made one choice, then another is upon you. So for example, this afternoon, I had Yong Tau Fu. I needed to decide whether I would like it with bihun. And soon after, my son asked, hey, I'm going down for a snack. Would you like me to get me something? Get you something? So I said, okay, get me a popiah. So we have multiple decisions to make every day. And to me, it is a privilege because decisions can only be made by people who are alive. So this will be very much linked to what I'm going to share about in terms of making decisions when I still have choices and when I still am in a good mind to make some of these choices about myself and about my life. So in the process of journeying through cancer, I surrounded myself with artistic pursuits, and these are just some examples. Brown Center has a fantastic series of art lessons for us to choose from. So I've taken a few with them. One of them is Entangle, because when life brings with it the blows and the punches, it is not so much to avoid them, but how do I coexist with them? And that is where artistic pursuits allowed me to slow down as the uncontrollable manifest themselves. From my own illness to my husband's illness to his death, how do I still stay equanimous? And this whole concept of equanimity, how do I stay composed and calm, is still something that I am learning. And to me, it is rather difficult because my natural temperament, sanguine as I am, I think I'm still rather choleric. I think for those of us who are attuned to our temperaments, mm, so art slows me down. It allowed me to have a healthy outlet, an avenue to uncover and discover myself. And also last year, with a little bit more physical strength, because I was in remission for 3 years before my relapse came back. So in that very short window after my husband passed away, my relapse came 8 months later. So I surrounded myself with, actually it was his friends that extended their kindness to me to take me on journeys which I've never done with him before. So creating new memories, or rather not visiting places or activities that would remind myself of him, at least not so soon after his death, allowed me to maintain some form of peace and joy, and of course connecting with my own love, which is swimming. The closest I did was during my teenage years, during the Pesta Sukan period. For those of us that may be young enough to remember what Pesta Sukan was. So with the coming of the children, we, or rather the closest I go to the pool is to accompany my children for their swim classes. So with this recent break and window, I rediscovered swimming, and I'm glad that even though I am technically back as a cancer patient, I'm still able to do 50 laps very slowly, over 45 minutes in breaststroke. So these are little new steps that I am making for myself. And also, and here you can see I went into new terrain in Singapore. Last year we couldn't travel, so I visited the Clementi Forest on the left, the Tampines Quarry in the center, and on the right, the Pipeline Walk, which I did in 2 installments. Um, it was about 30 kilometers, but I did it in 2 installments. So you might wonder, having gone through so much of storm, thunderbolts, seismic earthquakes, how can I still find strength? I think it's about really knowing that death is something that will come, but how can I choose between now and death? I believe there are many moments that I can create to be positive, and I can celebrate to be positive. Well, not to put it, I think earlier on, and Angie put it in a very light-hearted way. Sometimes, when we're angry, we'll say, 哎呀，死了算了吧, and that is, okay, just die lah. But it is never so easy. While we can use death, especially in my dialect group, I'm a Cantonese, there are so many idioms relating to death. Okay, sometimes I laugh at it. Sometimes I just like, but really once we come to the crux of things, um, it is not so much to be sullen about it, but to really look at it with a lot more respect, and to say that I can live life differently and positively. So my parents, they are wonderfully still with us. That's Yutong, my brother. And with my parents, actually, they are coming over to my place tonight for dinner. I get to look at parenting from a brand new lens. And I have been loved, deeply loved. In fact, one other very important individual who is not here is my aunt. And they have been like, and she is like my parent to me, my mother to me. And I get to honor relationships a lot more differently once I know that their tomorrows will be less than their yesterdays. So it allowed me to grow as a person, to be more mature. I am also very grateful to be well supported by my brother, whom, especially since my husband's passing, has been a mentor to my 3 boys. So my 3 sons are 26, 24, and 17. I'm thankful. I thank God that they are good boys. They are well adjusted, and they have been the pillars in my life. And this entire perspective of life, that I am now surrounded by people that love me and people that I love, is a lot more precious. So I rather look at what I have. I be grateful for what I have, rather than what I don't have. And obviously what I don't have is health, but I'm not so sickly, at least not yet. So how can I optimize my days and my journey ahead? In the Chinese culture, I mention Chinese because I'm Chinese. It might be a taboo to speak about death. However, I would like to, I am thankful that together with my husband, we wrote our wills together. So paradoxically, the wills that we wrote, they were mirror wills. The will was actually meant for me. The irony was that I executed his will. So really, life is terribly unpredictable in every sense of the word. And so there was the will, and there was also what you call the advanced medical directive, which my husband has also put together. And alongside that, the lasting power of attorney. So, however, today I would like to focus on advanced care planning. And this is something that Ram Center is offering. I believe there are a couple of workshops coming up. But I would like to say that I am so grateful because just last month, Angie guided me, walked me through the purpose of the advanced care planning. And perhaps later she can share a little bit more. However, to me, advanced care planning was very different from the will. The will kicks in only after our passing. Advanced medical directive is actually very, very straightforward. It's actually to tell the doctors whether we would like to be resuscitated or we would like to be rescued in whatever situations that we could be in. So and the third is the lasting power of attorney, where perhaps our assets would need to be managed by our donors. So as shared, the will is something that we will not get to see it because we won't be around to get to see it executed. The other two are, they serve very different purpose. So perhaps I can share a little bit about advanced care planning here, because it allows me to connect with with my own values, with what is important to me, and with the people who are important to me right now. I wouldn't say it is so much of a control because we can never be totally sure of what's going to happen to us. So control in this case, perhaps I'll just park that term aside, but more to put it as a wish or a hope. So what I did after talking to Angie was that my three sons actually sat down with me one Saturday morning. I think for those of us who are parents and these are young adults or late teens, they are so difficult to get together. You know, it's like I've got to make appointment with them weeks in advance just to sit them down together. So this is at home where we got together and we spoke about and guided by a very simple template that Angie shared with me on what's important to me, what are my hopes and wishes, and what I would like to be considered if I am not in good mind, in good state to plan and prepare for myself. I think what emerged was something even more precious. It was to hear the individual voices of my three sons and to even hear from them what they could possibly do with me. At the same time, I could also hear diversity in their voices. And these diverse voices were very interesting because they became entry points for me to clarify. For example, there was this part about whether to resuscitate mommy if mommy is 30%, there's only 30% chance to be well and alive after a surgery. So my youngest son, Ethan, actually asked a very important question. He said, Mommy, would you rather be happy or would you rather be comfortable? So a lot of philosophical questions emerged on what I value and At one point, they know that I love Korean drama. One of my second son, Ian, actually said, let's sit with you to watch Korean drama then, if it makes so much of, if it means so much to you. And of course, in the end, we also spoke about the property. And Benjamin, my first, being a very logical son, actually said, perhaps for this point, we may need guidance from a lawyer. Perhaps that should go into the discussion of the will, which I have yet to redo since the passing of my husband.
So,
And
Ching, I'm going to get you to pause there.
yep,
So, since you're bringing up advanced care planning, so the whole point of advanced care planning is actually to help us to face death and the decline of our health, whether we have an existing illness right now or an illness that's going to come about in the future. It's something that's unavoidable. So, oh, Chingy, please stay online. You've disappeared.
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Your
just taking
camera.
a sip of water.
Oh, you can sip your water with your camera on. Okay. So one of the things that we talk about in advanced care planning is what is really important to us. It's not a question that usually that comes up in a normal conversation, but advanced care plan, one of the key question is what's important to us? What does it mean for us to be living? And so Chingy had mentioned, since she brought up watching Korean drama is something that makes her really happy. Okay. I hope she's not watching those that make her cry. Because sometimes I wonder how people can be happy when they're crying watching Korean dramas. Um, and maybe you can say something about which relationships really matter to you that makes you happy. Chingy?
Yeah. Yeah. So in the course of the conversation with the boys, I took the opportunity to thank them, that, I'm so proud of all of you. And it is not measured by the number of A's that you got, because their ages span across 9 years and they are at different stages of their lives. I tell them that, their presence and their connections with me actually make me so happy. So this whole process, even though it was meant to be one discussion, I felt that the ripple effect had been terribly positive, because thereafter it like broke the barrier of talking about death. And in the earlier talk, I even mentioned that perhaps I should gather my own Spotify list on how on the kind of music that I would like to be played at my funeral. So then they're like, okay, then go ahead, do it. And however, it's also the recency effect because of Papa's passing, and they were so wonderful in terms of um, showing up as children, showing up as sons and as grandchildren. So their strengths actually have rippled off on me as well. Angie, Mike, do you like to guide me with some questions?
Okay, that's great. So, as with many cancer patients, sometimes it can be a very gradual decline and then some dips. And it may come to a point that pain management becomes a very important part of the last stages of one's life. So, one of the questions I asked Chingy is how would you like your life to be sustained? If your life could be prolonged, because using technology today can help to prolong our life, under what circumstances would you want your life to be prolonged?
Yeah, that was a very, very difficult question. And I don't think I answered Angie when she asked me. And even after the conversation with my boys, it was very difficult to give a very definitive answer to it. And what I guided the boys in was to give well, it's a very mathematical paper exercise, because I told them, even if there is 30% chance that mommy can regain consciousness, 30%, no, let me go. Even if it's 50%, let me go. Now, if it is more than that, that's where they say, let's talk to the doctors. And that's when my youngest, Ethan, actually said, would you be happy if there's no quality of life? I would say that even while putting down the ACP, which I have just completed and submitted it to Angie, it is not like a, a story with a very clear storyline from beginning to end. These are just signposts that I have put in on the ACP, and at least it gives the boys some direction, some guidance, against a very well-meaning family and community that we are surrounded with, because they actually told me, Mommy, it was very good, very brave of you, very courageous of you to even engage in this endeavor. And it gives us at least that assurance that your voice is captured. Because what if there are multiple voices, well-meaning as they are, that may come in, and they might get afraid for making the wrong decisions, or they may feel guilty for not doing the right thing. Yeah, so yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that, Ching Yi, because when my brother was very unwell, unable to speak for himself, half his brain was gone after a stroke. Not knowing what his wishes are actually resulted in us siblings, as well as with his immediate family, having some
Mm.
disagreements. And this then had a lasting impact on our relationships beyond his death, which could have been avoided if he had talked about it, if he had put an ACP in place. So if we care enough about our loved ones, and that we don't want them to end up having issues with each other in disagreement to how our care is supposed to be in the moments that we can not speak for ourselves, then having this conversation helps, and our voices heard, or in some cases your parents or your loved one's voice is heard. So when we have an illness that we know we're never going to recover, we want our life to be prolonged yet another 3 days, another 5 days, another 14 days, which could be possible? Or is death something that we could look at it and say, well, it's a relief because there's just so much pain, and do I want to continue to have to endure this kind of suffering of our body? That death is actually welcome, that it's an escape, it's a relief. Yeah. So Chingy, what are your comments on this?
Wow, that's a tough one, Angie. I must say I haven't really thought so much about it, because my only reference point was my husband's passing. And his passing was just so swift. I wouldn't say it's sudden, but it was swift. What I can say is that the more I speak about it, the more healing I'm getting from his passing, and the less afraid I am. However, I cannot say that there is no fear, there is no worry. In fact, over dinner 2 nights ago with a girlfriend, she asked, Chingy, if you are to pass on tomorrow, what would you be most worried about? That means from now to tomorrow. And I told her it's my youngest son. And she asked me, which aspect about him? And then I said it could be his character development, not so much the academic part. So you are right to say that how cancer can manifest itself in the last stages can be so varied, because given the myeloma community that I have been surrounding myself with, I have lost 6 friends. All 6 of them passed on in very different ways. And I'm not sure how it would manifest for me, but at least what I'm grateful for is that I have time now to talk about things, to plan in some ways, and to still be able to enjoy life and enjoy quality living. So I look at my work as a privilege, as an opportunity to serve, and this whole capacity to reframe and to in Chinese they call 看得开, to be able to accept. And I like your earlier example on the walk in botanic gardens. Be clear on why we do certain things we do, and we need not win all the time, and it's okay not to win. I'm not sure. And Angie, am I responding? Yeah, this is a tough question.
Thank you. I had a friend who was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and she died almost exactly 1 year later. And I remember meeting up with her 1 week before she passed away. And my question to her was, what is one regret that you have? And she said, for not appreciating her health, her good health while she had it, was her one regret. Because by not appreciating the good health that she had so many complaints about everything else. Her children, her husband, her mother-in-law, things that she doesn't have in life. So talking about death helps us to be awakened to really what is it that's really important. And actually, number one is good health. And number two is having good relationships. And number three is knowing how to live the moment with peace and happiness in our hearts. Sadly, these are not taught to us. It's like, all of us want to be happy, but we don't necessarily know how. And sometimes the things we do, we end up screwing our relationships, right? Messing up our life, thinking that it's actually going to make us happy, and it doesn't. So when we are prepared to talk about death, we start to unpack what's really important to us in life. And then we will start to live our life more positively with gratitude and appreciation. And to be able to say the things that we want to say to the people that we care about and that we love, rather than when it's too late. And if we can say the words that we really like to express while they're able to hear us and appreciate the kind words, isn't it better to do it now than to do it over their coffin? And this includes us saying the things that are really precious to our children, to our friends, to our parents. So please don't wait until the moment is too late. So one of the things that I talked about with Chingy is after you are dead, after you're dead, what kind of funeral wake would you like? I know this is not like a normal conversation that most people have, right? But because I say to myself, you know what, I don't want those depressive, solemn kind of wake, that people come and then they look at your body and then they feel so sorry for you. And then they comment about your makeup, which is probably the worst makeup you ever have in your life. I want people to come and celebrate my life, to celebrate that I have lived, that I walk on this earth, and I have actually made some positive difference to people's lives. That's what I want people to come and celebrate. And I would even like a band, to play so that when you guys come, you're gonna be there and you're going to even, swing your body, dance. That's what I call a celebration. So I know this is pretty unconventional, right? So I said to Jingy, what kind of funeral wake would you like? So I'm gonna let her answer now.
Yeah, I was rather amused when Angie engaged me with those questions. And I actually translated that into the conversation with my boys. And that's where we spoke about having mommy's Spotify list to the music to play. And that, my friends and family need not come in black, because I believe that at least by then I would have celebrated my life quite sufficiently, and to be grateful. I think ultimately, as a Christian, I really thank God for what I have, and the gratitude that I bring to the people around me while I'm alive, and the love that I've been surrounded with can all culminate. Actually, it may not even culminate at the funeral. And Angie shared about having a gratitude party. Why not do it now? And what I've done, and Angie, you'll be pleased to know, I just met my primary school friends, and I actually did that. I say, oh, just in case, I don't get to meet you guys again. Let's just talk about what as what Chingy values in each one of you, and in return. So there were 6 of us, and one of them say, no, 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 I cannot take this kind of conversation. Then she started crying right in my house. But nonetheless, we did a modified version. So at least I have had that opportunity to express my gratitude to each one of them. There is a question in the chat, and is asked, I think, by May Liu, I think. She was asking if I experience pain while I do my activities. Oh yes, that was before my diagnosis. So before my bone marrow cancer diagnosis, I was having like rheumatism everywhere, pain knee neck shoulders. So I thought it to be rheumatism, but because it is bone marrow, it affects my bones. And there were also other symptoms like nose in blood. No, blood in nose. But yes, there was some form of debilitation, and that's why I sought greater clarity, and then the diagnosis came. But right now, I am thankful that I can move without pain, which is why I do not take for granted my ability to walk. Because in my toughest of moments, I need to crawl to my bathroom. And my husband will look at me like, wow, really, really that bad. But yes, so in retrospect, I really give thanks for being able to type on my computer, because my knuckles would have hurt, and my ability to walk, which is why I took up hiking, which was a dream. So being given this second chance in life is something that I'm very, very grateful for. Yeah.
That's wonderful, Chingy. Yeah, and we also talked about, okay, do we want to be cremated? Do we want to be buried? Like my mom insisted on burial. In a few years' time, her coffin is going to be excavated, like and exhumed. So we talked about this, and Chingy, would you like to share your answer? Or you can take a drink first.
Oh no, I'm good. I'm good. I actually already have a place that is booked, or rather my niche has been booked, and it is right beside my husband. It's at Bo Huat Road at All Saints Home. And before I spoke to Angie, I actually drafted, 3 pages of notes before I met her, because I know how busy she is. So I thought, since she's giving me her time, I should be prepared. And in my first draft, I actually wrote down to my boys that perhaps you should visit me like X number of times. Visit me and Papa X number of times. Birthday lah, death anniversary lah, as Chinese New Year, etc. Or Qingming. After speaking to Angie, the perspective that I got is that it is more important to hold the memory in my boys' hearts as opposed to the act of going to the niche. But I know this is a very personal and private position. So each one of us may hold a different position or perspective. However, it gave me the opportunity to revisit what could be mine. And when I brought it up to the children, when I said that originally I wanted you to visit X number of times, I could see that they were shaking their heads already. They go like that. But they didn't do it disrespectfully. But when I said that perhaps you can drop by once a year, it's fine. It doesn't matter which time. You don't have to coordinate the visit. And that's where my eldest son actually, and he's a very quiet boy, he actually said, we have Papa here at home. We have parts of his ashes at home. And he said it in his own words, but the meaning was the same. That is about holding Papa and Mommy in our hearts. That is even more important. So the legacy was not about residing in the niche, but the legacy was on the learning that they have received from us, the teaching that they have received from us, and how they have watched us role model, correct, but and to allow that legacy not to be just that physical place that they might need to visit or must visit. So this conversation opened up that perspective. Yeah.
Thank you, Ching. Yes, when she said to me, I want them to visit on this day and that day and that day, I said, well, your children might not be still living in Singapore. And, it might actually cause them to feel guilt if they can't meet your expectations even after death. So you're going to put them in a position of feeling obligated. And I said to Ching, I said, surely you're not living in that niche, right? I mean, you're not living in that hole, right? I mean, goodness knows where your soul is going to be. But, and what's more important is that our children hold our memory in their hearts. Like I feel I don't need to go and visit my father's niche or my mother's grave. What's important is that I live a life that I know they would still be proud of me of. That I'm a good person, I don't cheat, I don't lie, and then they, no matter how many times I visit them, so-called in the graveyard or in the niche, how would they be happy if they thought that, wow, my daughter's an embarrassment. Yeah, so how I live, I feel that's what I'm really holding them with meaning in my heart. Yeah. So one of the other things that I had a good chat with Ching Yi was, where would you like to die?
Yes. Oh yes. That went into my ACP eventually. Like I mentioned, the only reference point I have was my husband's passing. He passed on without us arriving on time in the hospital to say goodbye. He actually passed on at 4 a.m. And when we arrived, we were too late. He was gone. So I shared with Angie prior to talking to my sons that I would like my sons to hold my hand just before I go. And I hope that they can surround me when I go. And in that conversation, Angie guided me to rethink whether or not I am imposing on my children something which I did not get to do for my husband. Wow, I thought that was like a punch in my face. It's like, yeah lah, because you didn't do it for your husband, that's why now you want your children to do it for you. And yeah, I think after that, it was something which I did. I left it open because we never know how those last moments could manifest. But I did assure them I need not pass on at home. I'm okay to pass on in the hospital. I'm also okay to pass on in the hospice. A nice one, of course. And yeah, I even mentioned which one. And then Angie goes, what if it's fully booked? Then, uh, what might be an equivalent? So it was that assurance that they need not feel guilty. I think ultimately it's about them not feeling guilty. But I do know, and I hope I do hope that I do not have to burden them. I really pray that it will not be too extended to the point. There is this Chinese saying, 长病无孝子. That means when the illness is too long, you can't be expecting filial children because it's so draining on everybody. But yet, we cannot determine how long our illness will be or how long that high dependency could look like. Yep. So
Thank you, Chingy. So Ching is absolutely right. We have no idea when we fall ill how long the illness will be. And I think it's really important for us as a person is to be kind to our caregivers, to be easy in being looked after, and to allow them to also have a life to continue with. That their whole existence doesn't evolve around us just because we are the ones who are sick, as they have a life to live. So when Chingy first said to me, I would like my kids to be by my bedside when I'm dying, hold my hand. And I thought, wow, what if it was in the middle of the night and they can't get to the hospital in time? And then they might end up feeling guilty for the rest of their life that they were not next to mommy when she was in her last moments. And having come across so many people who die, that maybe there's a preference when you're in that situation to die alone, that we may not want people around us to feel so sad and make it hard for us to leave. But we don't really know, right? Until when we're in that moment. And that we may actually wish to have that peace to go. So it's really important when we have these discussions and do an advanced care plan to have the people whom we love and care about, their well-being in mind as well. That we do not in any way put them in a position that they will have to end up analyzing whether they did the right thing, whether they did what we wanted them to do, and whether that's going to leave any guilt in them. Because we do really want the people who stay on after we're gone to have a happy life. And for us to practice being happy now, to be joyful, helps us to stay happy and joyful to the last moment of our life. That we can die with a smile on our face. And that we are dying with no regrets because we know we have lived a life of kindness. Yeah. So I know there's some questions there, and maybe I will just address one that came up was, okay, someone says a visit to the niche is an opportunity for the children to make time to meet up. My siblings are in Australia. I'm here. My father's niche is in PJ. And we meet up. And the last thing I would want to think is that we meet up at my father's niche. So I hope you will reconsider suggesting that, because it would be very sad that the only time that we meet up is on my dad's anniversary. Yeah. So, it's better that we meet up because we have good relationships before he died, and we continue to have good relationships after he died. And that means we are not or did not fight over inheritance. So ACP helps us to help ensure that the relationships are good in the last stages of our life, and that to leave behind a will that will help them also have peace beyond our lifetime. And what we do, what we put in the will makes a difference too. So an LPA helps people to have access to our funds to help pay for all the medical expenses involved in the care that we need. So if you don't put an LPA in place, which is lasting power of attorney, and our children may need to access our funds to pay for hospital bills, then they might be actually stuck having to support all the financial commitments, and then in some way wishing that we'll die quickly. If not, they won't be able to sustain all the medical bills. So putting an LPA in place is really important. The ACP is not a legal binding document. It first helps us to have an open conversation, which you have heard from Ching, how she had a very open conversation with her children. And I believe that it also helps other relatives to know that her children knows what she wants, and that they respect then whatever the children decide on the mother's behalf, if the mother can no longer represent her own choices. And this way, they may also be less likely to interfere in decisions that the children will make. Yeah. So there are ACP sessions coming up. Actually, you can go to Eventbrite and book to attend one of them. So I'm giving you the link. And if you don't have a spokesperson, approach us and we'll see how we can help. But you also need somebody to be your lasting power of attorney, which ceases upon death and the will takes over. So LPA is really for someone to be able to administer our finances. Yeah. Okay, I can't just share a template here, but certainly you can go to the advanced care planning, which is called Living Matters, to get a sample of what the process is like. Okay, so Ching, perhaps some closing words. I didn't want to say last words. Closing words for the session. Yeah.
Angie, for the opportunity to share. Today's sharing is actually a lot more difficult for me because while it does open up many more unknowns, but that's the reality of life, isn't it? That, there seems to be more questions than answers. So this is where one of the mindfulness attributes can be practiced, and that is trust. To be able to trust in our faith and to be able to stay faithful to what we believe in, and to continue loving the people that love us and that we love. Yeah. Thank you.
And perhaps there's one question that you may wish to take is in the Q&A section. Is from Weeping. It says, Ching, I admire your incredible strength. May I know if you have moments when some cracks appear, and if so, how did you overcome them?
Oh, yes. Yes. In fact, cracks did appear just a few days ago when my own cancer marker is rising. I shared with Angie, and it is rising despite the drug that I've been taking, which actually did get me down for quite a while. And yes, this space that I'm in, most of the time I'm in a very happy, healthy space. But when I know that I am dropping into a dark space, that's where mindfulness comes in, where the awareness is a lot more heightened, and to bring myself back to the present through practice, through body scans, through talking out with my friends. And this is where having nourishing relationships, having nourishing conversations can be a lot more helpful than those that deplete us. And I suppose we are knowledgeable enough to know how to take on such conversations and to be able to watch ourselves when we move into darker spaces than we hope to be.
Yeah, thank you, Chingy, for also sending me the message. And for me, it's just to hold the space for her. Because sometimes by not trying to give advice or trying to make somebody feel better, but sending a maybe a heartful or heartfelt emoticon just allows them to spend some time in that space and allowing them to come out of it when they're ready, by non-judging or making us feel like we must do something to save someone, because sometimes saying something inappropriate might even be more um, harmful. So this is what mindfulness teaches me too, that just to be present, to show up, right, for the person.
Thank you.
Another question is, how do we help someone who lost their spouse through a speedier recovery and healing process? Chingy, would you like to?
So sorry, what was that, please?
How do we help someone who has lost a spouse to go through a speedier recovery and healing process?
Okay. I think there's no timeline in healing and in grieving. To me, is what I've learned in mindfulness is to befriend this space called sorrow and grief, and to allow it to manifest, because it is through these moments that we grow. I know, in fact, up to this point, I know I still grieve. However, I think in a quote that I shared by Thich Nhat Hanh, is how do we know that we are in sorrow? And in my case, it's a double whammy. How do I still allow joy to come into my many moments of a day? It is coexisting, I think. It's the symbiotic relationship between happiness, sadness, in this case, grief, and the multiple emotions that human lives bring, and to allow ourselves to embrace and celebrate. I know these sound like very motherhood statements. They are not easy to live out. Yet, being aware that these multiple emotions come in, I think what mindfulness has done for me is that it gives me the language to recognize and to accept and to embrace these multiple emotions. Many of them are very tough. And we find, like for me, I doodle, I journal, I swim, I walk. So these moments allow me to live in the present and to bring me back into having that perspective that, yes, I know I'm grieving, but I still have many good moments to live for. Yeah.
Thank you, Chingy. A lot of times when we lose someone or something, our mind has this tendency to focus on that person or thing that we've lost. And with awareness that comes with mindfulness practice is to shift the mind focus back to the people who are still alive with us and the things that we still have that we didn't lose. And this is what helps us to be able to find joy in the life that we have. And it's also important for us to be aware that every relationship has an expiry date. And when we remember this, we tend to then spend the time with each other joyfully. And when someone says something offensive or someone says something hurtful, it's just to let it go, that we don't add to the hurt because we know that time is limited.
Angie, may I add? I
Yes.
think the beauty of mindfulness is that initially I wanted to use it, to leverage it for managing the tough times as a caregiver and of course as a patient. But what was amazing was its transferability across practically all aspects of my life, including how I relate with my parents, my siblings, my helper, and now my son's girlfriends. So it is highly transferable. And only when we allow it to be open to its teachings, having said that, and yet be anchored on our own faith. So this is something that I have gathered. And now being able to speak about death is quite amazing. I never knew that I'll be doing this, honestly.
Yeah, it makes me feel so happy that we are able to have this conversation because it just means that, you know, we would then treasure every moment we have and every relationship that we have. You know, and that way, when we die, people will actually miss us. Imagine, right? If we're awful, we are obnoxious, we are offensive, then when we die, people will say, wow, thank goodness. And maybe there's some people in life that we feel that way. It's like, oh my gosh, maybe the war will stop if someone actually no longer lives, right? So that would be a terrible thing, you know, that somebody will say about us, isn't it? Yeah. So someone asked, how do we encourage our parents to do an ACP? My suggestion to you is to first do your ACP. And as part of the ACP process is to be able to talk to your parents and say, hey, mom or dad, you know, in case I fall sick and I am in a situation that I cannot make my own healthcare decisions, I'd like you to know what to do for me. Yes, you may get a response like, Choi, 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 you know, you cannot talk about things like that. But, you know, this is where you can put some realism and say, hey, dad, hey, mom, whether you die first or I die first, there's no guarantee. So let's, you know, I really like to have this conversation because I don't want you to be in a position that you don't know what to do for me. And by opening the conversation this way, helps them to become comfortable talking about death. And then perhaps that's when they can talk about theirs. Yeah. So, yeah, Chingy, go ahead.
Angie, I think for me, it helps that there was the recency effect and that my children are still young. They are still malleable. In another conversation that I had with another friend, I think that's where the current relationships in the among the siblings may not be so ideal. And even opening up this opportunity to talk about the ACP may be an uphill task. So that's where the leadership factor and perhaps the purpose factor may need to be facilitated. So yeah, just a quick reflection on that. Yeah.
Thank you. So we do have a team of people at Brahm Center that are trained or certified facilitators. So you can write to us if you're interested to explore this. And very quickly,